Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we have another news and rumor review to discuss. In today's video, we've got some signings to talk about, a couple of news updates from around the NHL, including a couple of injury updates, some contract extension talks, and a retirement. And we've got a couple of trade rumors to discuss involving the Flames, the Maple Leafs, the Penguins, and the San Jose Sharks. With all the latest from the past little while coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before I begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for future videos coming out on this channel. So in today's video, as usual, we got another news and rumor video here to discuss. We're starting off with some signings. So we got 6 signings to talk about here from the 4th and the 5th. I never touched on in my second and third recap video. So on July 4th, we saw 2 signings. One was an ELC and one was one of the UFAs getting scooped up. The UFA getting scooped up was in Colorado, as they have signed UFA Barre-Boulet, solid bottom 6 guy, spent the past couple seasons in Tampa, Montreal, Seattle. Last year was in Montreal. He's 28 years old. He's a center / right winger. He gets a 1-year deal, $775,000. Not a bad deal there. He had 2 games of NHL action last year after he had 6 goals and 9 points in 36 games the year prior in Tampa. So a solid season there from Barre-Boulet, mostly an AHLer. The Avalanche don't have a whole bunch of forward depth, so I would not be one bit surprised if Barre-Boulet was able to crack the Avalanche's roster, potentially even be a consistent bottom 6 guy. So I think it made a whole bunch of sense for Barre-Boulet, and 1-year league minimum. It's a deal I think the Avalanche can handle, so pretty solid sign there for the Avalanche. And then we saw an ELC be handed out for the Kraken's first-round draft pick, and that is Jake O'Brien. O'Brien is 18 years old. He's a center, gets a 3-year deal, $975,000 AAV. O'Brien was, I think, the 8th overall pick in this past year's draft. Looks to be a future top 9 forward. Could potentially be a winger if the Kraken feel like it. Could see him be a top 6 winger. Could also see him be like a second or third line center. So it's a solid pickup here for the Kraken. O'Brien's a year or 2 away from being an NHL level player. I think he's going back to play over in juniors, but I think when he's able to come over, O'Brien's going to be a stud of a player for the Seattle Kraken. So a solid pickup here for the Kraken. And then on July 5th, we saw 4 signings. The first one was in Washington. They signed their first-round draft selection from this past year. 18-year-old left winger Lyndon Lakovic. It's a 3-year deal, $975,000 AAV. Lakovic is versatile. He can play center. He can play wing. Very versatile sort of guy. He dropped to the Capitals. I think it was, 27th? So a solid pickup there from the Capitals. Now, once again, just like O'Brien, probably a year or 2 away from making the NHL lineup. I think he's also going back over to play in juniors. But I think this is a solid pickup here for the Capitals to sign their first-round pick from this past year to his ELC, so very interesting note there. Then we saw Columbus Blue Jackets sign one of the remaining RFA forwards, as they signed Dreger Voronkov, who's 24 years old, but one of their better goal scorers over the past couple of seasons. He's a center left winger, can play a variety of different positions, versatile. He signs a 2-year contract extension in Columbus with a AAV of $4.175 million. A really good deal there for Voronkov. I think it's a little bit of an overpayment for the Jackets, but it's only a 2-year term, so it's not like it's overly long term. And on top of that, the Jackets have cap space to use. So as much as I think it's a little bit of an overpayment, it's a deal I think the Jackets can really handle compared to some of these other teams. Voronkov this past year had 22 goals and 46 points in 71 games after he had 18 goals and 34 points in 75 games in his rookie season. So Voronkov has sort of under the radar been one of the better, more productive top 9 forwards in the Jackets organization. So as much as I do think it's a little bit of an overpayment to pay him over $4 million, it's a 2-year term. The Jackets have the ability to do so. I like this deal for the Jackets. So they are able to keep Voronkov in the system. Then we saw Seattle Kraken sign one of their RFAs. After already signing O'Brien, the Seattle Kraken signed RFA Kartye. He's a left winger / center, 24 years old, gets a 2-year contract AAV of $1.25 million. Now, Kartye is a 4th line forward. 1.25 is not overly bad. I thought he probably would have gone a little bit less, but once again, it's not an overly bad contract there. Kartye this year had 6 goals, 13 points in 63 games, after he had 11 goals and 20 points in 77 games in his first career season at the NHL level. So definitely down here points-wise, goal-scoring-wise for Kartye. I think he could bounce back and be a solid fourth line, hard-hitting, tough to play against forward next year for the Seattle Kraken. So not a bad signing there, as Kartye has signed a deal in the Seattle Kraken organization. And then we saw the Washington Capitals extend one of their remaining RFAs, as they have signed Lapierre, 23-year-old center who has had a little bit of difficulty being a consistent NHL player, gets a 1-year contract extension, AAV of $850,000. Not a bad deal there for the Caps. Lapierre had 8 assists in 27 NHL games this past year, after he had 8 goals and 22 points in 51 games the year prior. So definitely a lot less production, a lot less ice time at the NHL level last year for the Caps for Lapierre. But I do think the Caps did lose a couple of pieces in free agency, might have a little bit more of roster spots available, so I could see Lapierre be a consistent bottom 6 for this upcoming season. So 1 year, $850,000 for a younger piece on their team. Not a bad contract there for the Caps. So those are the 6 signings we saw from over the past little while, as Lapierre in Washington, Kartye in Seattle, and Voronkov in Columbus, all RFAs, get new deals. O'Brien and Lakovic, 2 really recent first-round picks, get ELCs by the Kraken and the Caps. And then Alex Barre-Boulet has joined the Avalanche. This is bottom 6. Some very interesting signings from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of pieces of news. We're going to start off with the 2 injury updates. According to recent reports, Sonny Milano, who missed the last year, most of it since November, with upper body injury, should be ready for training camp and will have an opportunity to compete for a roster spot on the Capitals team. So Milano, I think, has 1 or 2 years left at $1.9 million. There was some concern that he would probably miss training camp and potentially start the season, but it sounds like he's progressing well. There's a very likely chance he could carve himself out a bottom 6 role in the Caps organization, so that's a very good break there for Milano, as it sounds like he's going to be ready for training camp. Well, when it comes to Tyson Foerster in the Flyers organization, he has had elbow surgery, and it sounds like he will probably miss the start of the 2025-2026 season due to it. So it's a babble there for the Flyers. Foerster signed a new deal, and he was probably going to be one of the team's top 6 forwards this upcoming season. So that's going to be a really massive hole for the Philadelphia Flyers at the beginning of the season. He doesn't sound like he's going to be out for the entirety of the season. He'll probably come back at some point. My guess would be like November, December, but for the first maybe month or 2, it does sound like the Flyers might be without Tyson Foerster, so that will be a babble there for the Flyers. But very interesting note there that Foerster may miss the start of the season, and even though a lot of people thought otherwise, it sounds like Milano will be ready for training camp, so very interesting note there. A couple of other really interesting pieces of news. Mark Letestu, the former NHL player, is apparently taking a front office role in the Avalanche's AHL organization. I mean, a head coaching role, as Mark Letestu has been named AHL head coach of the AHL Avalanche affiliates. So very interesting note there. Is going to be head coaching the Colorado Eagles. I think the Colorado Eagles head coach, the AHL Colorado team, wound up taking an opportunity at the NHL level, so that team needed an AHL head coach, and Letestu is going to be the new head coach. So a very interesting note there. Maybe eventually Letestu could get some roles at the NHL level, but for the time being, he's the new head coach in the AHL affiliates for the Avalanche. So very interesting note there. Going over to a retirement, Christian Fischer, who's actually one of the younger retirements we've seen in recent memory. He's only 28 years old, has officially called a career, said it was time for him. He spent a long portion of his career in Arizona. He's also spent it in Columbus, in Detroit, and a couple of other organizations. Winds up finishing his career with a 62, 75, and 137 point total, 62 goals, 75 assists, 137 points, and 523 games. So over halfway towards the 1,000 mark was pretty good for Fischer, but apparently, according to him, it's time to call it a career. And at 28 years old, Fischer is going to leave the NHL, so very interesting note there. But after a pretty good career as like a bottom 6 forward, Fischer has called it quits, so very interesting note there. And going over to 2 quick updates when it comes to signings. According to a couple of recent reports, Kunin is garnering a lot of interest from around the NHL. Kunin is probably one of the better free agent forwards left in the free agent market. Him and a guy like Jack Roslovic and probably a couple of other guys. So with that in mind, it sounds like Kunin is a very likely candidate to get signed. I would think he probably gets like a 1, maybe 2-year deal around the like $1.5 to $2.5 million AAV mark. And I could see some teams who have some cap space still to play with try and take a run at him. So we shall see what happens, but apparently Kunin is garnering a lot of interest on the open market, and we'll have to wait and see where he signs. Well, when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, some regional reports are saying that after extending Connor Garland and Thatcher Demko on July 1st, they're now engaging in a contract extension talks with Kiefer Sherwood. Sherwood was signed, I think, last offseason, 2-year deal, $1.5 million AAV. Worked out fantastically. I think he had like a career high in goals, was a really good like third line point contributor, fourth line point contributor, and set the record for most hits in an NHL season. So I definitely think if they were to work out some sort of an extension, it would be like a 2 to 4 year deal at around the $2.5 million AAV mark. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But according to some recent reports, the Canucks and Kiefer Sherwood are beginning to talk about a contract extension. So very interesting note there. But those are the news updates from the past little while, as Foerster and Milano have some injury updates. Kunin is garnering interest from around the NHL. We could see the Canucks and Sherwood work out a contract extension. Mark Letestu is the AHL head coach for the Colorado Eagles. And Christian Fischer has officially called it quits and retired from the NHL. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we got 5 trade rumors here to talk about. A couple dating back to for free agency. A couple that could see some future movement. So we'll have to wait and see on what happens here. But first, we're going to look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. According to Frank Seravalli, the Penguins, a little bit surprisingly, were one of the teams who had some major interest on July 1st in trying to sign Brock Boeser. Now, this is something that's in the past at this point. Boeser has already re-signed in Vancouver, 7 years, $7.25 million. But it's interesting to see that the Penguins had some major interest in Brock Boeser. Boeser is on the Canucks. The Canucks and Penguins have a whole bunch of ties together. We know the Penguins have a lot of their former front office people in Vancouver, Alvin, Rutherford, to name a few. So there's a lot of connections between Vancouver and Pittsburgh, but it's a little bit surprising that they would want Brock Boeser. Like, Brock Boeser was one of the younger free agents on the free agent market, and the Penguins are sort of trying to start going through a retool. So I think if they were trying to offer him something, it would have been really hard to convince him, because I think Boeser really wants to try and be on a team that's at least pushing for the playoffs. Well, I've heard from multiple insiders that the Penguins are a team that really wants to go in the selling direction, tank for McKinnon next offseason. So very interesting note there. But according to Frank Seravalli, the Penguins were definitely one of the teams who had some major interest in bringing in Brock Boeser before he signed with Vancouver. So very interesting note there. When it comes to David Pagnotta and Frank Seravalli, they both mentioned that Brandon Carlo, who was a little bit out there at various points in the offseason in trade rumors, apparently is not going to get moved. According to David Pagnotta, he says that Carlo probably won't be moved and is now more likely to stay in Toronto than get dealt. Well, Frank Seravalli said that the reason why we kept on hearing Brandon Carlo's name is because he came up in Bowen Byram trade talks before the Peterka trade, because the Buffalo Sabres were in desperate need of a right shot defenseman. The Maple Leafs really wanted to get some sort of a defensive upgrade, so it makes some sense that if they were to acquire Byram, that Carlo would be part of the package that would have gone to Buffalo. But since the Peterka deal happened, they have Michael Kestering. There's a little bit less likely option that they'd be really heavily targeting a right shot defenseman. So with that in mind, it seems like the Leafs are probably less likely to deal Carlo at this point in time. I think it's still a possibility. If the Leafs really wanted to change up something on their blue line, I think Carlo's probably the most likely guy to get dealt. But I think at this point in time, with where the Maple Leafs are at this point, I really highly doubt that Brandon Carlo gets moved. And according to Pagnotta and Seravalli, they say at this point in time that really sounds like what's going to happen for the Maple Leafs. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to Chris Johnston and Darren Dreger, both mentioning stuff about Nazem Kadri. According to Chris Johnston, he says he is not hearing anything about Nazem Kadri at this point in time. And Darren Dreger says that maybe at the deadline the Leafs could have some interest, but at this point in time, Dreger is also hearing Kadri is not available for trade. So it sounds like the Flames really don't want to make too many more subtractions to their roster. There's already a whole bunch of speculation about Rasmus Andersson who's entering the final year of his deal. I don't think the Flames really want to move Nazem Kadri. Now, if they're in January, February, looking like they're on the outside looking in again, and they really want to try and tank for McKenna, I could wind up seeing Kadri wind up getting dealt. Like, I think there's a couple of the Flames out there who would have some major interest from a lot of other teams. Kadri's one of them. I think he's got like 4 or 5 years left, $7 million AAV, and has shown over the past couple seasons seasons, he can be a very solid second-line center, which is what a couple of these teams, such as Carolina, Toronto, and a couple of other teams have been looking for. So we shall wait and see on that, but according to Johnston and Dreger, as much as there was some speculation, some rumbling about Kadri being moved at some points in the offseason, they're both hearing that Kadri is not on the trade block and very unlikely to get moved, so we shall see on that. Next, we go over to the fourthperiod.com. They put out an article saying that Rasmus Andersson is still being discussed in trade talks by the Calgary Flames with both the Vegas Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars. So it's very interesting to note there. We know that the Flames, there's a very likely chance that either at some point this offseason or closer to the trade deadline, Rasmus Andersson will get moved by the Calgary Flames. It doesn't sound like he wants to extend in Calgary at this point. Probably wants a fresh start. He's a top pair right shot defenseman, which makes him a very valuable commodity. So I think there's a very likely chance that the Flames could get a really high ask for him, especially if he was to extend somewhere. Now, we've heard some recent reports from a guy like Pierre LeBrun saying that Vegas seems to be the only team that Anderson is open to signing an extension with. We've heard from other sources, though, that he might be open to signing an extension in another team. So Dallas and Vegas make a whole bunch of sense. Vegas is losing Pietrangelo potentially forever, with his career potentially in jeopardy due to injuries. So there's a very likely chance Pietrangelo will not play again in his entire career. He was the top pair right shot defenseman. You grab Rasmus Andersson, he can be a top pair right shot defenseman and play with his old buddy Noah Hanifin in Vegas. That might be a lot of reasons as to why he would be open to an extension there. So that's a possibility. And for Dallas, they really need some help on the right side at this point in time. They still need to move Matt Dumba. They still need to move Ilya Bushkin. Those two are not overly great on the right side. And if they do move on from one or two of those guys, they'll have a pretty big hole on the right side. So I definitely do think there's a possibility that even if there's no extension involved, the Stars will be all over trying to add Rasmus Andersson. They would have a couple of very interesting pieces. I do think the Flames will find interesting, so very interesting note there, but it does sound like, according to fourthperiod.com, the Flames are still having trade discussions surrounding Rasmus Andersson with some of the best teams in the Western Conference in the Vegas Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars, so we shall wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to David Pagnotta, he mentioned a couple of things when it involves the San Jose Sharks. He says that the Sharks are open to moving Timothy Liljegren and or Henry Thrun. Now, after the additions of John Klingberg, Dmitry Orlov, and Nick Leddy in free agency and off of waivers, they have a logjam on the blue line. They have Ferraro, they have Liljegren, they have Orlov, Leddy, and Klingberg, like I just said. They have Thrun, they have Mukama Doolin, they have Thompson. There's some people out there who think that Sam Dickinson will challenge for a roster spot this year at training camp. So with all of those defensemen that the San Jose Sharks have, there's a lot of people out there who speculate that they could move off one or two defensemen. And David Pagnotta is mentioning that Liljegren and Thrun are probably two of the more likelier ones. Liljegren's a year away from unrestricted free agency. If the Sharks do not feel that they can extend him, he is one of the younger UFAs that's going to be on the board next year. But if the Sharks don't feel like they can extend him, I could see Liljegren get moved. He's a solid right shot defenseman, second, third pair guy. I could definitely see a lot of teams that have no interest in him. Well, Henry Thrun's a left shot defenseman, more of a third pair guy at this point in time, but he's definitely on the younger side of things. I think he's a year away from being an RFA. So at this point in time, I think if a team was really cap strapped and could use a third pair defenseman on a cheaper contract, that might make sense for Thrun. So I'll have to wait and see on that. But Pagnotta mentions those two guys as potential trade options for the San Jose Sharks. When it comes to another thing he mentioned involving San Jose, he says that they also might want a top 9 forward and would be willing to dangle Mario Ferraro to get it. So very interesting note there. Like I said, this team's maybe 1 to 2 top 9 forwards, legit top 9 forwards away from being a scary team going forward. And I definitely do think 1 to 2 more top 9 pieces, whether it be this offseason or next offseason, and San Jose going forward is going to be one of the scariest teams to face in the Pacific Division. But they still need to trade for him. So Ferraro, he's entering the final year of his deal, $3.25 million AAV, very likely chance he will not be back at least via free agency next offseason. So with that in mind, I could definitely see the San Jose Sharks be willing to move Ferraro in the right deal to get a top 9 forward. And it would also help alleviate some of the problems with their defense. So we shall wait and see on that, but very interesting out there that according to Pagnotta, the Sharks are open to moving Liljegren and Thrun to try and alleviate some of their defensive problems with their amount of defensemen they have on that team, well, they will be willing to dangle Mario Ferraro if it was able to land them a top 9 forward. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think? Does the San Jose Sharks move a defenseman? Could they move Ferraro for a top 9 forward? Could the Knights or the Dallas Stars put together a package good enough to acquire Rasmus Andersson? Do you think Nazem Kadri will get dealt later on, closer to trade deadline, by the Calgary Flames? Do you think that Brandon Carlo will still get dealt by the Toronto Maple Leafs? And would you have been surprised if Brock Besser signed a contract in free agency with the Pittsburgh Penguins? Definitely your thoughts on all of that, the news updates, and the signing updates from our past couple of days. Love your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. All I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're not to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis of that, so check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. Cannot wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.